was, ironically enough, the communists. After 70 years of communist tyranny, 5 years of Gorbachev reforms, and 5 years of Yeltsin, the Russian people began to look back with nostalgia to the old days. The communists, under their leader Gennady Zyuganov, painted a rosy picture of the way things used to be: guaranteed jobs, assured salaries, affordable food, and law and order. No mention was made of the despotism of the KGB, the Gulag archipelago, of slave labor camps, or the suppression of all freedom of movement and expression. The Russian voters were already in a state of profound disillusion with the two once heralded saviors, capitalism and democracy. The second word was uttered with contempt. For many Russians, looking around at the all-embracing corruption and pandemic crime, it had all been a big lie. When the parliamentary votes were counted, the crypto-communists had the biggest single block of deputies in the Duma, and the right to appoint the speaker. At the other extreme were their apparently diametric opposites, the neo-fascists of Vladimir Zhirinovsky, leading the ironically named Liberal Democratic Party. In the 1991 elections, this crude demagogue with his taste for bizarre behavior and scatological expressions had done amazingly well, but his star was falling. Nevertheless, it had not fallen enough to rob him of the second largest block of deputies. In the middle were the political centre parties clinging to the economic and social reforms they had introduced. They came in third. But the real effect of those elections was to prepare the ground for the presidential race of 1996. There had been 43 separate parties contesting the Duma elections, and most of the leaders of the main parties realized that they would be best served by a program of coalescence. Before the summer, the crypto-communists allied with their natural friends, the Agrarian or Peasants' Party, to form the Socialist Union, a clever title, inasmuch as it employed two of the initials of the old USSR. The leader remained Zyuganov. In the ultra-right wing, moves for unification were also afoot, but were fiercely resisted by Zhirinovsky. Vlad the Mad reckoned he could win the presidency without help from the other right-wing factions. Russian presidential elections, like the French, are held in two parts. In the first round, all candidates compete against one another. Only those candidates coming in first and second qualify for the runoff vote of the second round. Coming in third is no use. Zhirinovsky came in third. The smarter political thinkers on the extreme right were furious with him. The dozen parties of the centre united more or less into the Democratic Alliance, with the key question throughout the spring of '96 whether Boris Yeltsin would be fit enough to stand for and win the presidency again. His downfall would later be ascribed by historians to a single word: Chechnya. Exasperated to breaking point 12 months earlier, Yeltsin had launched the full might of the Russian army and air force against a small, warlike mountain tribe, whose self-appointed leader was insisting on complete independence from Moscow. There was nothing new about trouble from the Chechens. Their resistance went back to the days of the Tsars and beyond. They had somehow survived pogroms launched against them by several Tsars, and by the cruelest tyrant of them all, Joseph Stalin. Somehow, they had survived the repeated devastation of their tiny homeland, the deportations and genocide, and continued to fight back. Launching the full might of the Russian armed forces against the Chechens was an impetuous decision that led not to a quick and glorious victory, but to the utter destruction, all on camera and in glorious technicolor, of the Chechen capital of Grozny, and to the endless train of Russian soldiers in body bags coming back from the campaign. With their capital reduced to rubble, but still armed to the teeth with weapons largely sold to them by corrupt Russian generals, the Chechens took to the hills they know so well and refused to be flushed out. The same Russian army that had met its inglorious Vietnam in attempting to invade and hold Afghanistan had now created a second one in the wild foothills of the Caucasus Range. If Boris Yeltsin had launched his Chechen campaign to prove he was a strong man in the traditional Russian